What Dr. Wood was doing, going back a little bit to sort of 2006, she was trying to, she gathered all these pictures, she looked at 40,000 pictures, because the thing with 9/11 is, you've got such a lot of evidence. A lot of things happened since 9/11. So when you've got a lot of data, you can look for other data which matches that. Dr. Wood was looking for things about energy effects, because she'd seen it wasn't a kinetic effect. There wasn't, when the towers were destroyed, you didn't have something crashing into them to do all that damage. Alleged plane crashes, yes, but alleged plane crashes, real or fake, don't turn buildings to dust. So how do you turn something to dust? She was basically looking for things which could turn the buildings to dust. And she ended up saying, well, it must have been some type of energy, so she was looking for energy phenomena. And I think in 2006 she discovered this blog about this thing called the Hutchison effect, and she was speaking about it to me actually at the time, and said, look, I found this blog with all these weird metal effects, because she'd in the World Trade Center pictures she'd seen bent beams bent into an S shape. She'd seen jellified aluminium that was sort of all melted, but it couldn't have melted because there wasn't enough heat. The paper next to it hadn't burned. In other words, if you melt aluminium at 600 degrees, the paper next to that would be burned. She'd got pictures where the aluminium was clearly melted, but there was paper right there that was not burning. So she'd seen these effects, and then she realised that in John Hutchison effects, and to explain what that is, John Hutchison is, I should say, a Canadian experimental physicist, a researcher, and he had been trying to reproduce the experiments of Nikola Tesla, and he started doing that in 1979. And he basically realised that Tesla was seeing energy effects. So John was looking at all of that, trying to find out what he could do, what was going on, what he could reproduce. And he gathered together some equipment, some old microwave generators, radar equipment. He was using a Tesla coil, which is a special type of electrical coil which has got copper wound wires, and used to build up a very high voltage. So he was using that. And then he was basically setting up his lab so that this energy, electrical energy, magnetic field, microwaves, could be mixed together in an area. And he was seeing levitation, he was seeing metal melting, he even got things to disappear, he was seeing strange fuming effects. And in the 80s, he became a bit more well known for this, because he was in an apartment, and in the apartment next door to his, a picture would fall off the wall, or things would start behaving oddly, and ornaments would fall over, and this sort of thing. And he realised that the effects that he was creating were, happening over a distance, not immediate. Mostly where he was doing them, but there was things that were going on just outside. And so he started to get attention. He got on local TV, people seeing his experiments, watching these effects. And then he was visited in 1983 by a chap called Colonel John Alexander, and he worked for Los Alamos National Laboratories, and he appeared to know the effects that John was seeing. He knew that when John did certain things, certain effects would be observed, such as levitation, such as metal bending, certain effects on water and stuff. Alexander, according to what John told us, appeared to be familiar with this. So that tells me that in 1983 Los Alamos already had this technology, or a version of it.
Beginning of 1980, experimenting with all the electromagnetics and electrostatic equipments I had at the time, I started to notice some very, very unusual effects, such as a room being filled up very quickly with multicolored lights, metal turning to jelly, things levitating and jumping off to the ceiling, or simply go up, hover, and then fall back down.
But he was perfectly open. He didn't try and conceal anything. He was just, and he still is. He says he's having fun. So basically, the Hutchison effect is a set of effects. Really, it's more than one. It's levitation. It's electrical phenomena, which is seen. Such as strange glows sometimes, and he also gets weird fires, like we've seen at the World Trade Center. It's levitation. He also has had pieces of steel which he puts into his energy fields, and they'll start showing rust or even transmutation, which is where one element turns into another. So this was an exact parallel with what Dr. Wood saw on 9/11. So when she beamed down his blog, where she saw the melted metal, the weird fires, levitation, those are all seen and given in witness testimonies and some photographs and even some videos to some extent in the World Trade Center evidence. So she knew there was a connection. And then when we published that connection in actually 2007, November 2007, when we published that connection, they started to go after John Hutchison. They started to do a character assassination. They used a technology which creates the same effects as John Hutchison does. But for example, he uses an electrostatic field from a Tesla coil. The analogue to that appears to have been Hurricane Erin. With a thunderstorm, you have electrical activity, and then we know, for example, that the Earth's magnetic field changed. Dr. Wood, that was another thread of research she did. She downloaded all the data from the Alaska magnetometers, and I think John has seen certain effects on the magnetic field. John has used microwaves, and one of the horrible things that's in Dr. Wood's book is people in the towers actually reporting that they're getting really, really hot, but they seem to be getting hot in a situation where there isn't necessarily a fire next to them. They're reporting being hot but not burned. So it appears from some of the witness accounts and some of the phone calls that were made that they were being heated up alive, which one of the ways of doing that, of course, is microwaves. John was using microwaves as well. So you've got that. One of the things that he observes is that when you put this energy onto samples of metal, sometimes it has immediate effects, but then quite often the effects will continue. It's like you set off some type of chain reaction, but it's not. It's one that takes like months and weeks to sort of develop, because it smoulders away. It's like a smouldering, and it's like the material starts to break down, and that's what happened, we think, to the Bankers Trust. Because if you look at the effects on nearby cars, the rust, things rust when they're out in the open, but you've got really sort of quite heavy rust on this truck, and the picture is, and it looks like it's been out in, a rainstorm for about a year. But yet this is only 2 days after 9/11. It's a Pepsi Cola truck, actually, that comes to mind. And you can see this in the presentations. So this appears that what happened there was that the steel which is in the vehicle has been transmuted into iron, because iron and steel are very similar, and somehow the carbon has been taken out of it, and I think some steel's got manganese in it as well. And so you've got this transmutation, and that was another thing that was seen with cold fusion experiments. Pons and Fleischmann reported transmutation, which is where, for example, you have an electrode made out of one metal, but then when you scrape the electrode after the experiment, you've got another metal, like zinc or copper, and I think the original electrode was palladium. And this sort of thing was seen in John Hutchison's experiments, where he was getting other elements like copper being deposited on stainless steel bars. Well, that's what it looked like. And that's another no-no. Just imagine, the old thing, alchemy, turning lead into gold. What if you could really do that? I think they've got the technology. I think they can create as much gold as they like. This is the black world, folks. You know nothing about it because you don't have access. Government leaders know nothing about these black programs because they don't have access. So who's really running the planet? The people that run these black programs. They have the technology. They have probably star travel technology. They have energy technology, materials technology, transmutation technology, health technology, and this is hardly discussed anywhere. Nobody who talks about 9/11 talks about black programs. They'll talk about the financial dealings, stuff like that. They'll talk about how Bush must have known. Then beyond that, people have to realise, and this is partly why I wrote my book, that the alternative truth movement is also perception managed. And so because of the topics that I've just mentioned that don't get talked about very much in the alternative knowledge community, people in the alternative knowledge community never become aware of them. People don't get into the certain topics. They'll be happy to talk about financial things, reinvestigating the Holocaust, things like that, but they won't look at flying saucers. They won't look at how that connects into the energy issue because they think that's just all not my bag. You know, I don't really want to get into that. It's too. So people never hear about these sorts of things. They never think about the secret technologies that truly world changing.
Yeah.